For centuries, the Exodus narrative has stood as the bedrock of Israel's identity, yet many claim archaeology offers nothing but silence. But what if the very absence of grand monuments reveals a deeper truth? By the end of this film, you'll understand why the lack of evidence is often the strongest proof of all. Imagine 2 million people, a nation of slaves, walking out of the most powerful empire on earth, led by God Himself. This is the Exodus, a story of epic plagues, a parted sea, and divine deliverance that shaped the destiny of a people. For generations, this account has resonated through history, etched into the very identity of Israel. Yet, when archaeologists began systematically excavating ancient Egypt, a perplexing question arose: where is the evidence? Where are the grand inscriptions boasting of Pharaoh's defeat, or monuments commemorating the Israelite sojourn? The initial silence seemed deafening. But wait, are we looking for the right kind of evidence, or expecting a type of record that simply wouldn't exist? The very nature of this unprecedented event might hide its traces in plain sight. Could the perceived absence be, paradoxically, a powerful confirmation? What if the Exodus wasn't meant to fit neatly into Egypt's self-serving historical narrative? The Bible tells us of a powerful Pharaoh, a king who hardened his heart against God, but it never gives us his name. This anonymity creates a profound archaeological puzzle. Historians and archaeologists have proposed various chronological models, from the 15th century BC, the early Exodus, to the 13th century BC, the late Exodus, each with its own candidate pharaoh. The challenge is immense. Without a name, how do you pinpoint a specific monarch or even an era for such a monumental event? But here's the crucial pattern interrupt: ancient Egyptian records routinely omit the names of defeated enemies or inconvenient truths. They chronicled only triumphs, never humiliations. Why would a pharaoh record his empire's devastation and the loss of its slave labor force? This deliberate silence could be the first clue. If the central figure is unnamed and the empire's records are skewed, how can we even begin to pinpoint the era, let alone the event? Perhaps the key lies not in royal monuments, but in the ruins of ordinary people. Before the Exodus, Israel dwelled in Goshen, a fertile region in the eastern Nile Delta. Genesis chapter 47 verse 11 tells us, Pharaoh gave them the best part of the land, the district of Ramesses. Archaeologists have, in fact, uncovered extensive evidence of Semitic populations in this very region, particularly around Tel el-Dab'a, identified by many as ancient Avaris and later, Pi-Rameses. These were not just transient groups. They established settlements, built houses, and engaged in typical Egyptian activities, but often with distinct cultural markers. But wait, while a Semitic presence is crucial, it doesn't automatically equate to Israel. The Hyksos, another Semitic people, ruled parts of Egypt centuries before a proposed Exodus date, and their expulsion is sometimes erroneously conflated. The key isn't simply finding Semitic people, it's finding evidence of their sudden, mass departure. And what does archaeology reveal about the specific sites associated with the biblical narrative? We need more than just a presence, we need a powerful, sudden absence that points to a specific event. At Tel el-Dab'a, a site in the eastern Nile Delta, archaeologists have made extraordinary discoveries. This location, strongly associated with ancient Avaris and later, Pi-Rameses Exodus chapter 1 verse 11, reveals a massive Semitic settlement. Excavations show a flourishing city with distinctive residential quarters, cemeteries, and even a large palace. What's truly compelling is the evidence of their labor: mud bricks, many containing straw, just as described in Exodus chapter 5 verse 7. But here's the pattern interrupt: around the proposed time of the Exodus, this vibrant, populous Semitic city suffered a catastrophic decline and sudden abandonment. The houses were left intact, suggesting a rapid exodus, not a gradual migration or military defeat. There's no evidence of battle or a subsequent reoccupation by a new population. This isn't just a handful of families, it's a sudden void left by hundreds of thousands. While this abandonment is compelling, it only sets the stage for a grander event. What about the plagues, the crossing, the wilderness journey? Surely, such a cataclysmic event would leave some direct mark on Egypt itself. The Exodus plagues, described in Exodus 7-12, are not just inconveniences, they are supernatural judgments designed to humble Egypt's gods and Pharaoh himself. From turning the Nile to blood to the death of the firstborn, these events would have crippled the empire. Yet, direct Egyptian accounts detailing these specific disasters are conspicuously absent. But here's the crucial pattern interrupt: Egyptian scribes were propagandists, not objective historians. Their records were designed to glorify Pharaoh and maintain the divine order. Recording plagues, the devastation of their land, the collapse of their economy, and the loss of their primary labor force would have been an act of sacrilege, undermining Pharaoh's divinity and authority. Why would they immortalize their humiliation? We cannot expect official Egyptian monuments to corroborate such a defeat. It simply doesn't align with their cultural practice of recording history. If Egypt silenced its own suffering, how can we expect their monuments to confirm a divinely orchestrated collapse? What about the destinations of the Exodus? What do we find there? Following their dramatic escape, the Israelites spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness of Sinai. Numbers 33 details their numerous encampments. Archaeologists have scoured this vast, desolate landscape for traces of this massive nomadic population. The challenge is formidable: nomadic peoples, by their very nature, leave minimal archaeological footprints. They don't build cities, they erect temporary shelters, their refuse is scattered, and what little they leave behind is quickly reclaimed by sand and wind. Exodus chapter 16 verse 35 even states, "The people of Israel ate manna 40 years. A miraculous provision means they weren't farming or building permanent food stores. But here's the pattern interrupt: while permanent settlements are scarce, the region does show evidence of ancient routes and transient populations consistent with desert travel. The lack of cities isn't a refutation, it's exactly what you'd expect from a divinely sustained, nomadic people. The desert is vast and transient, but if millions emerged from it to conquer Canaan, that must leave an undeniable mark, right? The story isn't over yet. The climax of the Exodus narrative culminates in the conquest of Canaan, spearheaded by the miraculous fall of Jericho, Joshua 6. For years, archaeological interpretations of Jericho were hotly debated, with some scholars claiming the city fell centuries before or after the biblical account. But recent re-evaluations, notably by archaeologist Bryant Wood, offer compelling evidence aligning with the biblical timeline. Pattern interrupt: the archaeological findings at Jericho confirm a catastrophic destruction of the city's walls and structures around 1400 BC, consistent with an early Exodus date. The walls collapsed outward, forming a ramp, and the city was burned. Crucially, storage jars were full of grain, suggesting a swift siege, not a prolonged famine, aligning with Joshua's swift conquest. Moreover, evidence of other destroyed Canaanite cities in the Late Bronze Age points to widespread upheaval. The conquest provides a powerful post-Exodus anchor, but it still doesn't fully answer the core question: what about the Exodus itself? We need to connect these threads. The silence from Egypt isn't an absence of the Exodus, it's precisely what we should expect when God humbles an empire. The lack of monumental Egyptian records detailing their defeat, the sudden and unexplained abandonment of a massive Semitic settlement at Tel el-Dab'a, Pi-Rameses, the minimal yet consistent traces left by a nomadic people in the Sinai wilderness, and the specific, divinely orchestrated destruction of Jericho, all paint a compelling picture. Archaeology doesn't provide a neatly labeled Exodus monument, because the event itself defied earthly explanations. It was a miraculous, destructive, and deeply humiliating event for Egypt, one they would deliberately erase from their history. The evidence of absence, the lack of continued occupation after the departure, the lack of Egyptian boastful claims, becomes a powerful, indirect confirmation. It forces us to look beyond conventional historical expectations and consider the supernatural dimension of the Exodus. This isn't a tale of mundane migration, it's a testament to God's sovereign hand, leaving clues for those who search with both faith and an open mind. The very challenges in finding direct archaeological proof strengthen the case for a miraculous, divinely orchestrated event that refused to be confined to human records. The Exodus, seen through archaeology's lens, reminds us that God's power often manifests in ways that defy human expectations and imperial narratives. If this deep dive into biblical truth and ancient history moved you, subscribe for more journeys into the sacred past.